Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Hello. Hope I'm live. um, yeah. It's been a while, guys. How you doing? Today we have a conversation with a lad named Miles from Twitter, and we will be talking about Ukraine and some stuff that was said in a slight argument we had on Twitter and the like. I'm going to be giving him a call here in just a sec, and then we will be good to go. I'm just double checking all of my microphone and everything. How do I play something that's not going to get me horribly copyright infringed? I know. I will just play the opening to this. Awesome. Cool. That is all I needed because I saw the waveforms. So you guys should be able to hear everything. Full screen. Hello, hello. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can. Fantastic.
Excellent. How's it going, man?
It's going pretty good. I hope you're doing all right.
Yeah, man. Doing well. Doing well. It's been
Let me...
busy day with the children, but it's going to be nice to sit back and I don't maybe relax may not be the right word, but do some other stuff.
I don't know. Hey, man. If it turns out to be relaxing, awesome. If not, so be it. Let me get my windows all resized here. You don't mind being face cammed on the internet, do you?
No.
Okay, cool. I'm moving all of my windows around here real quick. This is my first having other folks on.
Oh, wow. I'm honored.
Yeah. There, that'll work. That'll work. That'll be fine. That'll be fine. All right. So, I believe we had a slight disagreement about Ukraine. But yeah. First and foremost, tell the folks who you are.
Hey everyone, I'm Miles Schneiderman, and I'm currently I edited a wrestling news website, so that should be credentials right there. Yeah, I've been I've been doing a lot of podcasting for the last decade, which I think is how we know each other.
Yes, I was a big fan of Smash Fiction back in the day.
Yeah, it was a good show. But as it happens, I also have a degree in journalism and political science.
Damn.
And I have been following and in my own way covering events in Ukraine and Russia related stuff since right around 2013, I think.
Okay.
When I started really looking into it. So I've been on this for a while, you know what I mean?
Yeah. While I don't have any academic credentials per se, I am terminally online and do politics. As am I. Yeah. I do politics. And I had a brief stint where I was working with some refugees from the Ukrainian war crisis, helping them get citizenship. So
nice.
Yeah. Not this war, the 2014 Euromaidan. Maidan.
Right. Yeah.
And stuff like that. So this should be interesting. Now, before we really get into it, I was wondering where you stand, like, politically, fundamentally, because I'm really anti-authoritarian.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
I am super far left. So like,
okay, I think we'll probably agree on a lot of things then.
Yeah, and one thing that I always tell people, like when I start political debates, is like one thing that's good to understand about me is that, like, you know how the right will always accuse leftists of like hating America,
Yes.
and they'll always be like, "Oh no, we don't hate America, man. Come on, that's hyperbole." In
Yeah.
my case, it's not really. Like I kind of do.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. I also don't think America is the best place in the world.
Yeah.
Like, there are better individual places, but I think as a whole, America has a lot of, well, we're testing that system to its breaking point right now, but
Mm-hmm.
at least we have a leg up on a lot of other places.
It's a decent place to live for sure. Like when it comes to actually like choosing a country to live in, this would probably be close to the top of my list, even though there's a lot of fucked up shit that goes on here. I can swear here, right?
Oh, by all means, swearing
Okay,
is
just making
encouraged.
Just making sure. I don't know if I'm going to be able to talk about this stuff without swearing.
Oh no,
so,
go right on, man.
Yeah, but in terms of like how America treats and interacts with the rest of the world, I think that this country, which is the country that I live in, full disclosure, I think we're the villains in a sci-fi movie. Like I think we're like really the bad guys here in basically every global conflict that we enter into. So that's really informs a lot of my perspective on this whole Russia-Ukraine thing.
Okay, I would agree with you in a lot of situations. There are some key ones that I would highly disagree with you. World War II, big disagree. Not villains there. Stopping Nazis is pretty important.
Yes, in that case, we have the luxury of there being like an actual, like an even worse villain. And I will also say, World War II is sort of an interesting inflection point because, first of all, the first thing I'll say is this: while it was good to enter in there and stop Nazis, it wasn't really until after World War II, until the United States kind of took the lead on restructuring the global order that existed up to that point, that we really became this sort of like, empire building project. So, so there's that. And also I'm not saying you're wrong that Nazis are bad. I do think the Russians did a lot of the stopping of them, and I do just want everyone to remember that we dropped nuclear bombs on Japan.
That is true.
So
I don't like that.
Yeah.
But there is something that you said there that I want to address. The Russians helped stop Nazis. I agree they did, but the Soviet Union was not great. And
oh god, compared, no, especially under Stalin. Christ.
No, God no. Not even under Lenin. Like Lenin was a piece of trash once he took power.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But,
yeah. So, as I said, I think we're going to agree on a lot of things here, and it's just going to come down to like some very minor disagreements.
Yeah.
So, when it comes to Ukraine, why America bad?
In my view, America bad because we could have prevented this and chose not to.
How would we have prevented this?
The most immediate way we could have prevented it, in terms of like stuff we could have done in early 2022 before the invasion, which incidentally, invasion bad, Russia bad for invading, Putin bad for ordering invasion. Like I'm not here to defend Russia or Putin about any of this.
Okay, good. I was a little worried.
No. I mean, look, I'm not. I think some of the propaganda that's come up goes a little insane when it comes to Putin, but like fuck that guy. That guy sucks. I'm not a Putin guy. I'm not a Russia guy. Like, and they definitely should not have invaded Ukraine, and it's horrible that they did, and they should be facing legal and moral consequences for doing that.
I believe they currently are.
Yes. That having been said, had the United States early in 2022, late 2021. announced to the world that there was no way ever that Ukraine was ever going to join NATO, I don't believe Putin would have invaded.
Okay.
Now maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
I think you're wrong about that.
Okay.
Because Putin, Russia under Putin has annexed Georgia and Crimea and was attempting to annex Donbass, and I don't think that would have stopped if NATO had been off the table.
I think okay, well I do, but I don't think we need to really get caught up on that.
Okay.
I think that in general, like beyond the specifics, NATO expansion, the fact that NATO promised not to expand eastward of Germany and then did, the fact that our relationship with Russia since basically the fall of the Berlin Wall has been characterized by very aggressive, very hawkish behavior. I think that America could have prevented this invasion by having less of an asshole mentality toward Russia in general. Like when Gorbachev was when they negotiated all the Cold War agreements and were like, no, we're gonna do all these like agreements where we back off on the arms race and we're gonna do all this stuff, and like they basically Gorbachev essentially ended the Cold War along with Reagan. He was a very popular figure in the United States. Everybody knew and loved Gorbachev. Gorbachev, he was winning Nobel Peace Prizes. He was, he really wanted to build a state in Russia that sort of resembled what we're seeing in Scandinavia, sort of a democratic socialism.
Yeah.
And he had brought in the process of democracy to Russia. He had done a lot of good in terms of that for Russia. And then, he goes to meet with the leaders of the West, the United States and the Europeans, and he's like, hey, I'm gonna need some help. I'm gonna need like a lot of help like building this, like we can do this together. And we told him, and by we I mean the West collectively, not just America, but America by that time essentially is the one telling the West what to do. We told him no. We told him no, fuck you. You're actually, if you want help from us, if you want help from the IMF and the World Bank, you're going to impose the same crippling austerity measures on your people that we've asked everybody to impose. Yeah. And Gorbachev refused. And that, of course, was followed by Yeltsin, and Yeltsin breaks up the Soviet Union, and everything that happened after that, I mean, God, it's like, there is such a long history, and this is what people don't seem to understand about Russia, is that, like, there is such a long history of them coming to us and being like, hey, do y'all want to, like, make this work? Do you want to help us? Would you like to help us, like, join the community of nations and bring our people out of poverty? And us saying no. No, in point of fact, we're going to take steps to further impoverish you. We're going to support the Yeltsin regime, even when he surrounds the parliament, and bombs it. And like that's what we're going to support. We're going to support your corrupt leader, who wants to just completely loot you of all your national resources. And so there is that, and then of course also there's the United States' history of regime change in Ukraine, which should be considered, not just in 2014. The first one was in 2004. We were the ones promoting the protest movements and like manipulating the Ukrainians into regime change, just like we did. I think, for everything I've read, suggests to me that the 2004, the Maidan Revolution, was, while it certainly started out as a legitimate democratic revolution, as it was called at the time, like many revolutions are, it was co-opted, and it was co-opted by far-right forces inside Ukraine, and so like, I think the United States has spent years, decades now, meddling in Ukraine, not to help it. We never intended to bring it into NATO. Our goal the entire time, throughout our meddling with Ukraine, was to basically spook Russia. We wanted, this is on the record, like, people have talked about how there have been studies, like, from think tanks about how, like, this is how we bait Russia into another Afghanistan. If we can get Russia to invade Ukraine, then they're going to be expending tons of their resources. We're going to throw weapons at them. You know, fucking Washington officials didn't think that Ukraine was going to put up the fight that it has, which kudos to them, because they thought there was a Washington Post article that very early in the war that it revealed that they thought it was going to be over in a matter of weeks, and they were going to be funding like an insurgency.
Like, and a lot of and a lot of that, from my understanding, comes down to not only Ukraine being much sturdier than it was originally thought to be, since they've been basically building up tons of defensive lines and plans since the annexation of Crimea and the Donbass, but also just the sheer incompetence of the Russian military.
I mean, look, yeah, I've honestly had a hard time like finding a ton of sources that I necessarily trust and believe in terms of what's actually happening over there, but certainly, I mean, you know, they were supposed to take Kiev a year ago.
Oh yeah, I remember,
and they haven't yet.
I remember the giant line of tanks rolling down from, what was it, Belarus? Just to the north there, and then just getting absolutely decimated by the Bayraktars. Fantastic and, stuff there.
And one so basically my answer to you is I think the United States is using Ukraine. I think we are using Ukraine to get to Russia, and I think that if we had not been so dedicated to manipulating them and using them as a weapon, as a proxy weapon against Russia, this would not be happening.
Okay. Counter to that, I think that a lot of the... Now, I'm not going to speak because I honestly don't have a whole lot of at hand knowledge when it comes to the meddling in Ukraine before 2020 or 2014. Mm-hmm. That's not in my wheelhouse at the moment. But I don't see Putin and I don't see Russia under Putin's leadership as being anything other than a regime trying to restore or trying to go back to a Soviet Union greatness, if that makes sense.
Okay.
1 second. Sorry, I just got distracted by something, and I have to fix it.
No worries. Understood.
I have to fix it. Okay, maybe that'll work. I don't know. I just noticed my camera wasn't working on Discord, and it's being goofy. Anyways. Right, trying to re-glorify the Russia into the Soviet Union by retaking all of the little puppet states that they used to have. Mm-hmm. You can see this a little bit, I think, or a lot of bit, with how tightly Belarus is with Russia in this invasion. And what is it? Azerbaijan and Serbia? I think those two are right next to each other. Or am I getting my geography wrong?
Oh god. Geography is not, hang on.
Armenia, pardon me, not Serbia.
Armenia,
with Azerbaijan right now, like threatening to like reinvade Armenia or something. Just Russia continually seems to be poking. All through Putin's regime, it has been poking and seeing how much they can take. Poking and how much they can take. And while I fully agree that the U.S. never, and the West broadly, never handled post-Soviet Russia properly, in my perfect world, they would have been the Soviet Union would have fallen, and then money would have flowed in to help reconstruct the country, and the world would have become more unified as a result, and less, antagonistic towards each other.
Absolutely.
And in fact, after Russia eventually collapses from this war, I think that it is imperative that the West that has been supporting Ukraine moves in and supports the Russian people.
I don't think that's going to happen. If Russia does collapse from this war, then I think the United States is going to see that as a strategic goal achieved and move on to the final boss, which is China. because the U.S. does not want. The reason all of this is happening is because the United States will not accept a world, and by the United States, I don't mean the people of the United States. I mean the people in charge of the United States, the military, the government. Will never accept a world in which we are not in charge of everything. You know, the idea of a single polarity world or a multipolarity world, right? I mean,
yeah,
that's China is the threat, because China is the country that is threatening to match us in terms of, you know, of becoming a central country that dictates what the rest of the world's countries do.
mm-hmm.
And so I think all of this is part of a deliberate, sustained campaign to weaken Russia, because Russia is a buffer state for China and an ally of China. And I think we're trying to weaken Russia, leading to regime change and or collapse, which is, again, like, regime change has been a stated goal of all of this before Russia ever invaded.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna move on to China, and the fact that we're doing that despite Russia and China both being nuclear powers, and the fact that we have decided to restart the Cold War, is just utterly insane to me.
I'm wondering though, last month, Russia rejected the Chinese peace proposal that they put forward here. I'm looking at it right now on Wikipedia. It was 24th of February. China issued a 12-point peace plan calling for a ceasefire and peace talks. Zelensky indicated that he was willing to consider the aspects of the proposal, while Russia's foreign minister stated that it welcomed the Chinese proposal. Zelensky stated that he planned to meet Xi because it would be useful to both countries and global security. However, Putin's spokesperson Peskov rejected the peace proposal, saying that for now we don't see any of the conditions that are needed to bring this whole story towards peace. And then 2023 Belarus Chinese summit, Lushenko and Xi jointly stated deep concern about the development of armed conflict in the European region, blah, blah, blah. Okay. It just seems to me that Russia and China have been kind of not doing so hot over this whole thing.
What, you mean that their allyship?
Yeah, their relations over this particular invasion have been strained greatly.
Maybe that's also part of the goal. Who knows?
Maybe, but I don't know. It seems to me, I say that a lot. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
I know. I just catch myself on this sort of shit. It's just, I don't know. I'm having trouble seeing the master puppeteering, so to speak, when it comes to like America moving towards knocking down Russia and then China, especially when there are other countries. India comes to mind, especially another huge populous country that is about to explode and probably become another world power. It just, I don't know.
I think the Indian government leadership is favorable to the U.S. though. I think they're.
I don't think so.
I think we like who's in power right now. I thought they were.
Did it just change?
I could be wrong about that. I could be wrong. I'm gonna hang on. I'm gonna Google real quick. But I was under. It was my understanding that we approved of current Indian leadership. I could be wrong about that.
Okay, let me.
I mean, it's not. Yeah. Anyway,
it's not a big deal. I'm just curious because
it
was my understanding that Russia and India and China were all kind of talking to themselves or talking amongst themselves.
Yeah, I'll admit to having a bit of something of a blind spot here when it comes to India's role in all of this. So I'm not gonna sit here and call myself an expert on India for sure.
Me neither.
I will say that, like, regardless of whether or not you think there's a sort of master plan to go after China, all of this, that might be a little bit galaxy brain on my part. I don't know. That's just kind of how I see the big picture.
Yeah.
But I don't think I think it's very difficult to argue that the United States didn't want Russia to invade Ukraine, because I think we did.
When you so I need a very specific example of who the they is, and that, like, who the we are, like what forces in the US wanted that.
Probably Biden. I would imagine, the sort of the top level government, and then, CIA, Pentagon, the military industrial complex, as one might call it, and the intelligence community.
Okay. Interesting.
I mean, Biden's been the guy behind Ukrainian regime change for a while now. Like, that was why that was why that leaked. Remember that leaked call with Victoria Nuland and George Pyatt?
Yeah.
Back in 2014, where they discuss, the fact that they basically decide for themselves who's going to be the next leader of Ukraine.
That's what you got out of that call? I didn't get that out of that call.
Absolutely.
Oh, I was when I heard that. Now, it might have just been me mishearing it or something. I didn't get that they were deciding the next leader of Ukraine. It sounded more to me like who they were going to put support behind.
Well, I mean, those two things essentially amount to the same thing. Who the United States put support behind? I mean, they put their support behind Yatsenyuk, and he became the new leader of Ukraine. So, like, the United States, when we might not openly say we are declaring the new leader of Ukraine, but they, in the call, Nuland and Pyatt reveal who they believe should be the new leader of Ukraine, and then they talk about how they're going to make that happen, and they reference like needing the approval of Biden, who was vice president at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so Biden has kind of been very involved in Ukraine, which some people will tell you. I don't know that I'm one of them, because I don't know that I want to go to this particular place, because I don't know enough about it. But some people will tell you that is one of the reasons that Hunter Biden got the board seat on whatever he got the board seat on. Blah blah blah. Laptop story. It's a whole thing. I don't want to.
I honestly think that was more just because he had the name Biden attached to his name. And...
Very possible. Again, I'm not. I'm not that guy necessarily with the Hunter Biden laptop story.
It's just a whole bunch of revenge porn.
I do think there's some suspicious shit going on both sides of that. But regardless, so I think Biden is part of the plan, and I think that, but I think it's really, you're talking about CIA people, you're talking about FBI people. I think CIA mostly, like, intelligence community is what is dictating a lot of our foreign policy. What the intelligence community thinks we should do. Yeah, and I think they wanted Russia to invade Ukraine.
Okay. I don't know. I don't know what I think about that, actually. I don't know what I think, because I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that.
It's all good.
Now I remember so here's a question, I suppose. What do you hope happens as we stand right now? What do you hope happens as far as Ukraine goes?
I hope a deal is made to end the war as soon as possible.
Okay, and what does ending the war look like for Ukraine? Like, do they get all of their borders back?
Well, any deal, as you mentioned, China proposed something and Russia didn't like it. So, like, part of making a peace treaty with Russia, part of helping Russia and Ukraine stop fighting each other, is going to involve some concessions to Russia. And I think that we're going to have to kind of be okay with that, because I think the alternative is we give Russia nothing, Russia has no incentive to withdraw troops, war continues, and we march toward what could eventually go nuclear. So I think that anything is preferable to that. I think that anything that takes us closer to nuclear war should be avoided at all costs. And I think that if Russia ideally, let's say Russia, let's say Donbass and what's the other one, Lukansk, officially become part of Russia. They're a Russian-speaking ethnic group anyway. They're ethnically Russian. They support Russia. The whole reason they rebelled is because they didn't like the fact that Ukraine was getting close to the EU.
That's actually, from my understanding, that's wrong. Then that's Russian propaganda. Is that
really?
those regions are actually ethnically Ukrainian, primarily Ukrainian-speaking, and the idea that they were Russian and like mostly ethnically Russian is the Russian propaganda that has been pushed out constantly to justify their invasions and annexations.
Okay,
and in fact, like the far right wing defensive organizations there were also put there, but like funded heavily by Russia through back channels, like the Azov Battalion was originally partially funded by Russia when it was first getting started. And like that area has a really strong history of being like anti-authoritarian and anti the type of government that Russia has.
Well, I think that okay, that's two different things. First of all, I would love to get more information on where you're getting the idea that is Russian propaganda, because I haven't seen any source that I've looked at that suggests that the people of Donbass are ethnically Ukrainian and speak Ukrainian and want to be want to be part of Ukraine. I haven't seen anything about that. So I would be interested to see your sources on that, because I honestly I just haven't seen it ever at all.
Okay.
So everything that, like I said, everything that I've read, which I would like to think of myself as pretty well educated and have good sources, but everything that I've read has agreed that those regions are ethnically Russian and speak Russian, and that is why they rebelled after Yanukovych was overthrown. The other thing about Azov and the far right, that just strikes me as being really unlikely. And the reason for that is because, and maybe it's true, but because like you never know who's giving money to who, right? Who's delivering who back channels. There's like this whole, all of this is made way more difficult by the fact that everybody involved is swimming in corruption, and is really
that's just
hard
kind of
to
the
know.
world, though.
Yeah, exactly. I find it difficult to believe that Russia would support any group that identifies with anything resembling fascism or Nazism, simply because of the history involved. I mean, Putin is a lot of things, and none of them are good, really. But he's not a fascist. I mean, that his brother died at Leningrad. That guy hates fascism. And so
whether or not he hates it, though, is immaterial to whether he would use the people to get what he wants, though, right?
You're not wrong about that, and that's why
like I'm pretty I like the Chechens in the war, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're shitlords. They pretty right leaning there, and probably fall under that.
Are they Nazi shitlords?
I think so. They're pretty close to
enough.
Yeah, like, and what did he do with them? He sent them in to go wreak havoc and cause the most brutal war crimes of the 21st century, right? Like,
a lot of war crimes to choose from. I would hesitate by putting any one at number one without we have to do a definitive list.
Yeah. Well, at least put it this way: worst war crimes in Europe in the 21st century. There you go. That's narrow enough.
Fair enough.
But yeah, I just did a quick Google search, right? So I just did Russian propaganda regarding ethnic Donbass, And the top 3 links that I went to were from Le Monde, which is a French international magazine or publication, uacrisis.org, and europa.eu. And they're all roughly reporting the same thing, that the Soviet Union and Russian propaganda have pushed the message about Russia-speaking Donbass as well as Russian-speaking citizens of southeast Ukraine. However, official numbers say the opposite. In 1897, it was 58% of the people there were speaking Ukrainian, with only 31% Russian. And I know that's like over 100 years old, but that's 100 years ago. I'm looking to see if that article didn't have any more information that was newer. Let's see here. The propaganda that Russia pushed regarding Ukraine committing atrocities towards the Russian speakers in Ukraine has been debunked, as far as I know. Specific incidents
Good.
Specific incidents that is mentioned in the europa.eu article here is there are many instances of such fabricated stories, best illustrated by a famous example of a Russian television report accusing Ukrainian forces of crucifying a young boy in eastern Ukraine at the beginning of the conflict. That was entirely fake.
Sure, and those kind of dramatic examples usually are.
Yes, but this has been going on for as long as Russia has been trying to get into Ukraine, and whenever I'm looking at this whole situation with Ukraine, all of the information I see boils down to Russia being the antagonist in this. And I'm not saying that the US is great, because we're not. But when it comes down to choosing a side in this, I'm going to choose the Ukrainian people, because Russia continually is trying to provoke and intentionally trying to take. And
if they're good, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, and like all of the information that I can see about this, especially regarding like the stuff you just said earlier about the Donbass being ethnically Russian, it's not. It's primarily Ukrainian. There are Russian-speaking people there, but it's not a majority by any means. And the right action there would just to be have peace, right? Not to invade. Okay.
Well, yeah, obviously. So I appreciate you. That certainly some of these links. I don't see enough here personally. I haven't gotten in depth in a lot of these, but like, I just don't. A lot of the journalists and Russian scholars that I've read all agree that the Donbass actually is ethnically Russian. So, like, I'm not saying that what you're saying is necessarily wrong, but I'm not ready to just be like, oh, well, clearly I was wrong about that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I will accept there's a question about that.
Okay.
Regarding the idea of who to side with, it is obvious to me that the only moral side one can take, if one is going to morally support a group in this conflict, it would have to be the Ukrainian people.
Yeah.
The Ukrainian people are, I mean...
Strong agree.
Yeah, so like, I remember we talked about this when we were setting this whole thing up on Twitter. It was like, you know, I think you asked me, like, do I think the Ukrainian people has the right to defend themselves, something like that? Like, of course they do, absolutely, and they should. And I have so much sympathy for the Ukrainians because they didn't ask for any of this.
Agreed. So I just
think that Russia and the United States are both antagonists, and I don't think probably the most trenchant thing, like the most important thing I believe, is that we should not be sending in 2022, we sent $113 billion to Ukraine.
Yep.
Mostly for weapons.
Yeah.
30% of those weapons ended up on the front line of the war.
Okay.
I don't think we need to be sending them $100 billion in aid. I don't think that's a good use of the United States resources, and especially because, and it would be one thing
if
nothing
in the United States' eyes, though. 130 billion is like what? Less than 1% of our GDP?
I mean, $113 billion, if otherwise applied, could make a lot of difference various
places domestically. It could, but we're not going to do that because of the way our democracy is set up right now, right? Like,
okay, fair enough.
If we're dealing with where we are right now, we have to be like, okay, yeah, we're not going to be spending money on the homeless like we should be. We're not going to be spending any money doing anything other than developing the next F-47 jet fighter or whatever, right?
Right.
The least we can do is send some goddamn guns to Ukraine so they can kick invaders out of their borders, right? I sent you a quick pic. Okay, I sent you a quick picture to get back to an earlier point. Of majority language by city, town, and village councils from the 2001 census.
Where's this from?
This is just from Wikipedia. It's just it's from the 2001 census. Let's see the actual.
A huge Wikipedia fan, but I'm not saying this is wrong. I'm just saying I'm not a huge Wikipedia fan.
I'd have to like find where the census came from, of course. But
right, of course.
If we take this on face value, the only place that Russia, assuming you take the idea that a Russian-speaking ethnicity is a good enough reason for Russia to yoink a place, would be Crimea.
Oh, I didn't say it was a good enough reason to yoink a place.
Oh, I'm not saying you were. I'm saying for the Russian side of the thing.
Yeah, totally.
The only place that would be good enough to do that would be like Crimea, and even then, I don't think it's a good enough place just because some people speak the thing. I mean, by that, Texas should be Mexico, right?
I mean, they can have it as far as I'm concerned. No, I just think that you're not wrong in terms of obviously that money comes out of the military industrial complex. It's going to stay in the military industrial complex. Biden just announced a new budget with more money going to police, more money going to military, and all the fucking fake progressives in Congress are going to approve it. And
well, not like Congress has much of a fucking choice at the matter at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That said, I do think that that if I had any reason to think that the United States was sending money and weapons to Ukraine so that we could help them expel the Russians from their borders because we care about protecting their democracy, then maybe I would be okay with that money going over there.
I think that might be where we disagree. I don't necessarily care why we're sending the stuff there right now, because for the matter at hand, I care more about the ends. I care more about the people's sovereignty against authoritarianism than I care about what's going to happen 20 years down the line from now.
Here's the thing. I'm
a bit of a utilitarian like that.
That's fine. I'm not really. And okay. I don't think that the protection of a state that is nominally democratic but certainly remains a proxy state of the United States. We decide who is in charge there.
I mean, that was true. That was true in that one election. I don't think that was true for Zelensky's election.
No, but Zelensky ran on a platform of peace and with Russia. Zelensky ran on a platform of let's not, the people that I've read that I'm not in a position to say this is true with any certainty at all. Okay. But I know a lot of people who believe that essentially Zelensky has been threatened into reversing that position by the far right forces within Ukraine. Again, not not saying that's definitely true, but I think that like when I say that the United States like decides who their government is, like if they elect somebody who we're cool with, then great. If they don't, they're gonna get regime changed. And I
Maybe.
do care, definitely. We do it all everywhere. Ever since the end of World War II, the United States has been rigging elections, assassinating democratically elected leaders, just generally meddling with other countries.
I agree with that. Like before, what was it, like 2010, 2012, right?
What happened in 2010, 2012?
Internet. The freedom of information became so much bigger. As you like, I honestly think, and this may be a bit naive of me, but I think that as you grow this base of information that people have access to, the people in those countries that have democratic societies are going to be able to better defend themselves against foreign interference, including America's. Now, that requires robust systems on their part, because we can see how America didn't do that. We didn't have robust systems of education when it comes to internet stuff. And so we got the fucking 2016 and 2020 nonsense with Trump saying that the elections was stolen, and the foreign interference that got Trump elected in 2016. But after that, a vast majority of people in the US have gotten more competent at determining like where to get information from. And especially with the pandemic, I think that's also true.
Yeah, I'm not going to call you naive, because I think I understand why you think that. I just don't share that belief. I don't think that the internet has, in the long run, contributed to people being more informed, and I think the internet has become another propaganda tool of the state, personally. And I do think that we continue to I do think we interfered in Ukraine in 2014. I do think that the Maidan protests were, I mean, McCain went there and supported it. Like I think that
but isn't that okay? Like, isn't it okay for a foreign?
It's okay.
Yeah, it's okay for like a foreign guy to go and like support a change in, like, it would be almost weird, right? If somebody, say China immediately right now had a revolution and a democratic society rose up. It'd be weird if Biden didn't go over there and support them, right?
Well, but so this was before the actual coup, but regardless, if that's, you have to ask yourself, if that's what they're doing on the surface publicly, what are they doing not on the surface? What's happening behind the scenes?
I already agreed with that stuff.
Yeah. So like I'm just saying, the Ukraine in 2014 is, to me, an example of us continuing to meddle in foreign elections and meddle with foreign democracies. And I just don't, it does matter to me that the United States is giving money to Ukraine not for the purposes of helping Ukraine, but for the purposes of dragging out the war as long as possible, because the longer it goes on, the more resources Russia spends on it. That, to me, is monstrous from the perspective of of being on the side of the Ukrainian people.
Yeah,
because
if that's true, that is correct.
If we hadn't helped them, if we hadn't given them money and weapons, just like hypothetical, if we hadn't given them money and weapons, and Russia had just come in without meaningful opposition, okay, let's give the Ukrainians more credit than that. But I think it's safe to say that part of the reason they've been doing so well is because of our support. Would you agree with that?
International support has been incredibly important.
Yes. So
I'm not sure if you remember this, but just a small little nugget. Around this time, or April last year, there was the Ukrainian, I think it was Defense Ministry, or maybe just some group of guys, put out an entire song about how good the Turkish, I think it was Turkish or Hungarian drones,
do you remember
the Bayraktar song.
Do you remember this?
Yeah, that was great. And like, I think it's that international support that is important, not just the United States one. Because even if we didn't get involved, I think that enough other countries would have, that while Ukraine may have fallen, it probably would have taken double or triple the time Russia thought it was going to. Like, they might have fallen at the end of the summer, right before winter, rather than holding on through the winter.
Sure, that's fine. So, like, say that happened, and now say that happened. It happened just like that, and now now the fighting is over because Ukraine has fallen. Russia has taken over the country essentially. Let's just say, like, to my mind, people aren't dying anymore.
I think that's a good
thing.
Oh no, I think that with the way
I'm not saying it's a good thing that like they successfully
I gotcha. It's not a good thing that they were invaded, but the war is over. The war is over. Ukraine is occupied. I don't see people dying stopping. I see between Russia and China, they both have a pretty bad history of ethnic cleansing. Under their regimes.
Putin's Russia is a pretty multiracial state.
I mean, yeah, but I don't think, because there is a long history in Russia and through the Soviet Union with Ukraine of being anti-Ukrainian, like really heavily anti-ethnically Ukrainian. Are you familiar with what's happening with the Uyghurs in China?
I'm familiar. Yes, I'm familiar with various perspectives on that. Yes.
Okay. I worked with people who were in those communities that escaped and sought asylum when I worked as an immigration paralegal. That is real. They're being genocided and re-educated. So if my testimonial can persuade you, know that it is as bad as it is being reported, if not worse.
Certainly not going to argue with you about it. Absolutely not.
And I see what Russian troops are doing as they were invading and taking land to civilians. And I don't think that the Russian military would have stopped that just because they got the whole state.
Okay. All right. Well,
I honestly think that the only way that we end this is if Russia pulls back to the original borders of Ukraine and leaves. Like, all Russia has to do is leave.
I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't either. Unless Putin does.
Well, yeah, maybe. But frankly, it might not happen even then. But not. I don't think that's going to happen unless the West gets more actively involved in the war. And if that happens, we're not just looking at Ukraine. If that happens, we're looking at World War. And we're looking at potentially nuclear war.
Potentially. And there is actually
that's not worth it to me. Not worth it to me.
I don't like nuclear war. I'm fully on board with avoiding it as best as possible.
It would be weird if you did.
There is a slight little nugget that I've been reading about. Have you been reading about the upkeep of nuclear weaponry? Like, and how hard it actually is to upkeep?
I have not.
So there are isotopes that are required for the detonation of a nuclear weapon that deteriorate in years, that have to be replaced. And it's not a cheap replacement. There are some experts, and I'd have to dig up their articles if you really want me to, I can, that are saying that Russia doesn't have the nuclear weaponry that it thinks it does. I know, right?
Maybe they don't, but I don't want to find out.
I know, but I don't want to find out either. But I think that part of the reason Putin has been so brash with his nuclear brinksmanship is because he's bluffing.
I can't disprove that.
I'm not asking. This wasn't an argument. It was just me putting it out there. It was not an argument.
That's fine. Maybe it's true. I just don't think that. I don't think Ukraine. I don't think protecting the democracy, the democratic institutions of Ukraine, is worth potential nuclear war. And if that makes me a monster, then I'm sorry. But
I have a question then. An honest question. Would you have said the same thing in World War II with Britain?
I don't know.
Okay.
What do you? I'm confused. What do you mean?
When Germany was threatening to invade Britain, when they were doing the Battle of Britain, the Blitz, would you have originally said that the United States should not have gotten involved there because it could have risked an entire world war, and Britain's democracy was not worth that?
I don't really know how I would have felt then, but I know that there was a strong element of the United States population that was against going to war.
Yeah. I know they were, and I thought I would think that they were wrong.
That's fine. I think I'm not. I think they have a point at least.
Okay, that's fair.
And I think that, look, I'm also just, the other piece of this too is that I think it's very telling that this is what the international community has decided to rally around. Because if we actually care, again, I just keep coming back to this, but I just want to keep hammering this point, like, we don't care about the Ukrainian people. No military intervention that the United States has engaged in since World War II has been about trying to help people. It just hasn't been. It never happens. And I don't think, if we care so much about people being annexed and their territory being taken by force by occupying powers that ignore treaties and regularly kill people and commit human rights violations and war crimes, why do we not give a shit about Palestine?
I do. Like,
I know you do.
Yes.
Do
okay.
Too,
fair enough. Fair enough. I get. Sorry. I took it wrong. I agree, and that is why I attempt to be as politically active as I can be to try and change the way that the U.S. works. I think it comes down to the utilitarian argument for me. I care more about what the people of Ukraine want than I care about what the military-industrial complex of America wants. Just because I can't do anything about the military-industrial complex, but I can help the Ukrainian people.
I would argue there are some things we can do about the military-industrial complex. It's really fucking hard.
It is, and that's why I try and be as socialist as possible.
Right, absolutely, and you should. I don't support the United States going around being global policemen. I don't support the United States going around being like, we have the resources and the ability to stop this bad thing from happening. It is our responsibility then to do that. The reason I don't support this idea is because that's not what we do. We don't intervene in places where, and again, like from a utilitarian perspective, like, I get what you're saying, that like, regardless of the motive, at least the thing is done.
Yes.
But it's worse afterward. I mean, look at Iraq right now.
Yeah, like, and I don't think we should have. I think we should have done better in Iraq. Like, right, I think we should have not left Afghanistan. I agree. Well, I mean, yes and no. I think that there were good enough reasons to help the Iraqi people get rid of a monster who was doing genocide. I don't think that the way we did it was right.
Okay, but the way we do it is never going to be right because we're not doing it to help those people.
Well, I agree, and that's why I would like us to do it to help people.
But we're not going to, and we're not going to do it in Ukraine either. Regardless of how this all turns out, the Ukrainian people are not going to come out better for our intervention. No one ever does. I
actually disagree. I think that Ukraine is in a weird place. like geopolitically, they've got a lot of popular support around the world right now, like from democratic people, right? And I think that if they make it through this, can actually become a really important bastion of liberal democracy and like left leaning ideology, because they've been so heavily influenced poorly by the authoritarian ideology that is the Russians, and helped by the West, by the liberal democracies of the West. Now, whether that happens or not, I don't know. I think it can. I honestly think that, like, Ukraine, if they come out of this on top, they could have a really strong, vibrant liberal democracy that could become like world leading in its goodness.
I honestly, truly, with no sarcasm of any kind, I admire your optimism in that regard. Maybe I'm just a cynic, but
that's fine. We need cynics, man.
But I mean, I think I'm very optimistic in a lot of different ways. But like but when it comes to U.S. intervention, I am the most cynical person you will ever meet. I just don't think there's any chance, because it's never happened before. Yeah, it's just never happened before.
And I mean, no one had ever flown before. A couple of sons of bitches from North Carolina decided to strap together some bicycle parts either, man. Like, I mean, there's always room for growth.
Okay. I mean, look, again, admire the optimism.
Hey, if there's not optimism in this world, it's a very, very bleak place.
I agree with that, and that's why I completely, like I said, I'm not being sarcastic or shitty at all when I say I admire it. I just don't think there's any good outcome for the people of Ukraine at this point. I really don't, because I think that even if they do kick the Russians out, I think that we'll do what we always do, which is utilize the shock and trauma of what's just happened to them to implement austerity measures and strip them of their nationalized resources, and do everything that we have done with every state that we've ever attempted to influence. I mean, if anybody, like, I really strongly, if you haven't read, I'm not going to make a bunch of book recommendations, but if you haven't read The Shock Doctrine by Naomi Klein,
I've not read it, but I've done adjacent. I've pulled a lot of stuff from there. I've heard a lot of stuff from there.
I mean, this is a thing that we did this to Russia.
Yes,
Russia is probably the worst example. Like,
yeah, it is.
This is, so like I just don't have any optimism when it comes to good things happening as a result of U.S. intervention in foreign conflicts. And if that's the place where we disagree, I think that's a fine place to disagree.
Yeah,
but that's why I will never support U.S. intervention.
Fair enough. Well, I hope you don't get too mad about me posting a whole bunch of stuff about the Ukraine war and how we should be sending more javelins, more HIMARS.
That's fine. I'm just likewise on the other side, because basically, if you go to my Twitter at MJ Schneiderman, you're more than welcome to do it. I post about professional wrestling and leftist politics.
There you go. So, yeah, I post about leftist politics and the occasional cat girl joking about the cat girls.
Yeah. And I post a lot of shit that's anti-American, like anti-U.S. intervention and that kind of shit. So like I don't think either of us is really walking away from this really changing our position. But that's fine. It doesn't have to be about that.
Damn good conversation. Yeah.
It's a damn good conversation, and I think it's important to recognize that, like, it's a conversation that can be had, and that, like, not everybody who has my position is a crony getting paid by Putin, and not everybody who has your position is, like, hopelessly naive.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
That is very true. Yeah. As I said earlier, I was a little bit worried that you were tanky, and it doesn't sound like you're tanky.
Fuck that. Nope.
Yeah. That was my biggest worry going into this. It's like, oh god, I'm gonna have to talk to a tanky. He's just gonna be like,
socialist. I'm a socialist, not a communist.
You would not believe how many people are socialist and tankies.
Well, true. Yeah, but No, I
Also,
don't care for Russia, man.
I'm a communist, but not the USSR. I think the USSR was actually fascist. It's a whole nother conversation.
That's very interesting. I would love to have the conversation sometime. But yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
No, I remember I wrote a paper once in college about how Marxism should be tried. It should be tried here because Marx never envisioned a transition from feudalism to communism directly. Marx thought we needed feudalism, then capitalism.
Yeah, as a stepping stone.
Then communism, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's never actually Marx's vision has never actually been realized.
No, it has not. It's been sidestepped pretty heavily.
All right. Anyway.
Yeah, well, this was good talk.
It was good talking.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Well, much more productive than sniping each other on Twitter.
Exactly. That's why I like having conversations with at least one face. Apparently, my camera worked at all during this.
Not for me. I'm not sure if it has for anyone else or not, but not.
Well,
for me.
it's on my stream, so at least.
Okay, well that's good.
All right, and again, if you want to shout yourself out again, have the platform.
Yeah. So again, my name is Miles Schneiderman. I don't really have any creative projects going right now, but because I have a full-time job and a wife and 2 kids these days. So who has time for that shit? But if you're interested in previous stuff, my friends and I did a podcast for like 5 years called Smash Fiction, which is very fun and stupid, and you can go check that out. Like I said, there's a lot of it, and they're all still doing podcasts together, Hard Choices and Garden Plot Skeletor and all that good stuff. So you can go check out all that shit. And then, if you are a pro wrestling fan and you want to go somewhere for all your pro wrestling news, might I recommend WrestlingInc.com, the website that I run. Where I'm the lead editor. So, I think that's about all I got to plug.
All right,
I guess I should say you should probably. I do still do one current podcast, which is the Unspoiled podcast. Which, if you want to hear, my friend Natasha has this whole network of shows where she goes over like books and movies like chapter by chapter. One person has read it before, the other person has not, or seen it before, or whatever, and they go through and talk about it. It's very fun. All of the shows that I do with her are behind a paywall, so if you want to listen to me on there, you have to become a patron of her. But you should do that because she has like a ton of content on there, and we covered like the Dark Tower series together. We did some Game of Thrones coverage together. We did the Neil Gaiman Sandman comics. We did Twilight. We did Mistborn. We're currently doing the Charlene Harris Sookie Stackhouse books that True Blood is based on. So Unspoiled. If you want to check that out, that's the place you should go.
I have a little bit of a bugbear with the Name of the Wind series. Have you gone back to that recently?
I have actually never read it.
Okay, well, don't. It's not worth the time. I have a hardline hate boner against Patrick Rothfuss right now. It's almost unwarranted. Almost.
He's one of the guys that also takes forever to finish his books, right? He's like another George Martin there.
He's gotten his money and is not doing anything.
Right.
The problem with his books, TLDR, is that they're really badly sexist in a world that he built.
Oof.
And he hasn't, as far as I know, walked past that, walked that back. He's more like, oh, it's just the way the world is. And then what he does is he writes very beautiful language, marvelous prose about absolutely nothing. The books basically boil down to, I'm going to go to college. And here's some story threads that I'm not going to talk about. And college.
Well, fair enough. Yeah, I've got that book, so the first one sits around here somewhere, but I never actually read it.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful language, but damn, the story goes nowhere.
I'm trying to work up the moxie, I guess, to do. I've got the most recent Brandon Sanderson Mistborn book that I have to get through, because as soon as we're done with Sookie Stackhouse, we're supposed to go back to Mistborn. And while I love Mistborn and I think Sanderson's a very good writer, it just kind of becomes a slog after a little while, and I've been having so much more fun. I've been having so much more fun reading these like much lighter, character-driven stories where the writer is actually like having a good time, even though it's not the most meticulously written.
Yeah.
As opposed to like, I spent 24 years figuring out my magic system, and now I'm going to show you how cool it is.
Yeah, that's the Jake syndrome when it comes to world building. I spend way too much time figuring out how sewers work, and then never tell anybody else. It's just in my brain.
I get wrapped up in that in my own writing, and I've recently decided that I'm just not going to anymore. I'm just gonna set everything in the real world because that's the one I know.
Yeah, it's a good plan, man. Good plan. Yeah. Well, I appreciate the conversation. I'll let you get on with your life.
Hi, man. All right, take care.
Take care. Bye. That was incredibly nice. I am glad we had that conversation. Oh, all right. Do I want to do anything else with my stream today? Yeah, why not? Let's do something. Do I have... I do have things to talk about. Okay, so first off, let's talk about the conversation. Let's do a little review, a little recap. Good conversation. I actually really, really liked it. Miles is a great guy. Good guy to talk to. Brought some stuff I didn't know about to my attention. But yeah, as we got down to the end of it, I think we just have a fundamental disagreement about where to go from things. As far as like starting fundamentals and the U.S. and Western role in how the world works. Yeah, that sort of stuff. So let me get this up and running. Okay, so first question of the day for streaming purposes is, what is the National Prayer Breakfast, and why the fuck does it exist? Great question. The National Prayer Breakfast is a, like, once a year, twice a year? I don't know. It's an event that takes place, Rush, right? Where you have had... Like, it's an event that takes place, and it's explicitly Christian, and it's kind of behind closed doors, and it's a whole bunch of people that get together and push their Christian ideology onto politicians so that they can pass that legislation, which we can see is working so well for us today. We can see here, this is an NPR article for the... prayer breakfast, where Congress is asserting some stuff. So Congress takes a hold of the prayer breakfast from secretive Christian evangelical group. On its face, the National Prayer Breakfast is a serene, bipartisan event full of spiritual reflection. But over the years, the breakfast has also been a source of controversy, full of shadowy fundraising, behind-the-scenes lobbying, and even infiltration by Russian spies. So lawmakers have now taken it out of the hands of the secretive Christian evangelical group that runs it for decades, otherwise known as the International Foundation, or the Family, otherwise known as the Fellowship Foundation. Also, how evil does your organization have to be that it's just singularly called the International Organization? I mean, come on. That's some pretty evil shit right there, right? All right. A name popularized in recent years by a book by the same name and a 2019 Netflix documentary based on it. It painted a picture of a clubby, closed-door group that had ears of lots of Washington power players and bold-faced names without much transparency about their donors or agenda. When Senator James Lankford, Republican of Oklahoma, and I were co-chairs of the National Prayer Breakfast for a number of years ago, there were lots of questions raised about the finances, who was invited, and how it was structured, said Senator Chris Coons, Democrat of Delaware, chairman of the Senate Ethics Committee and frequent participant in the prayer breakfast. And frankly, we had to admit, as co-chairs, we didn't know much as we felt we should have. Democrat from Delaware Coons and several others help, a new nonprofit group was formed, the National Prayer Breakfast Foundation, with the sole purpose of putting on the signature event, which I don't think should exist, because there should be a separation between church and state, and this seems like a pretty strong endorsement of church for state. It's headed by former Democrat Democratic Senator Mark Pryor of Arkansas, liberal bastion that place is, who said the first big change, in addition to the new legal status, is it will be smaller and more controlled, or maybe more insular. We expect there to be maybe 300 people in attendance as opposed to like 3,500 in years past, so it's going to be just members and plus ones, and hopefully it will be a smaller, more intimate gathering. The event is also being moved from prominent Washington hotel to the U.S. Capitol complex. The changes will essentially wall off members of Congress from mixing with any unforeseen guests who present potential conflicts of interest or worse, otherwise known as basically just being an event for more lobbying. It's going to be more controlled. There are still questions about how much the new group is a break from the old, and then this goes into where the National Prayer Breakfast came from. Basically, it was Eisenhower, blah, 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 blah. What is the family? Now, this is the part that I actually really want to get into, is what is this family? What is this international organization, right? The group ran the prayer breakfast for decades, but the breakfast is just the tip of the family's influence. It has wide and international reach of elite friends, and unlike the televangelists seen on TV screens on Sundays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays, Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, the fellowship is deliberately cloistered. I wish I could say more about it, but it's working precisely because it's private. President Republican Ronald Reagan said in 1985 of his work with Doug Coe, the longtime leadership of the fellowship. Coe died in 2017. Sad for him. The group has ties reaching from the highest to the lowest rungs of federal government. Senators and members of Congress huddle with representatives of the group in a townhouse on Capitol Hill known as the C Street Center. Let's take a look, shall we? Little brick building. So innocuous. Who knew what could possibly lay within those walls? What dirty, dirty sausages would be made? Members close to the group have said they reflect on the kind of week they are having and sometimes do Bible studies. Much of what they discuss, though, by design, is not known. There have been concerns about the family's access and questions about its agenda. The group has paid for overseas trips for members and been close in particular to GOP members and is linked with anti-LGBTQA+ initiatives. In recent years, the prayer breakfast ballooned from a relatively small event into a multi-day affair that drew thousands and went beyond just prayer. Oh, here we are into the Young Turks. That was what that was linked to. This is just talking about the group, a queer group, a queer advocacy group here, warning about the prayer breakfast. Because why would having a bunch of right-wing authoritarian Christians who want to start a theocracy be a bad thing for the queer community? I wonder why. Let's see. That include Maria Butina. In case you're not familiar with Maria Butina, she was a Russian agent who joined into the United States government at a fairly high level during the Trump administration. In 2018, the Department of Justice charged Butina with a conspiracy to act as an agent of the Russian Federation within the United States without prior notification. In other words, the U.S. government said she was really a spy. She was arrested and convicted to serve 15 months in federal prison, and when she got out, she began serving in the Russian parliament. That's pretty fucking clear-cut, I think. The event had become unwieldy, and it became difficult to keep tabs on who was coming and going, mixing with lawmakers, which is important because you want to make sure that the people you are having in office are being held to account professionally, right? That's kind of the definition of public service. Following some of the revelations, many Democrats stopped attending. Something had to change. I do think that there were concerns raised and expressed by members of both parties, both houses, about a range of different issues, Coons said. Some involved who were the invited guests. Some involved the book and Netflix documentary that you referenced. Some just involved a lack of clarity from an ethics perspective. Oh, I love that. I love some people who are involved a lack of clarity from an ethics perspective. It's just what you want to hear, right? Excuse me. About how the event was structured and organized. It certainly doesn't mean the fellowship's influence still won't be entrenched in Washington. It will continue to hold its own event at a DC hotel and will beam in the speeches of the event for the gathered audience. Besides, in the dark is mostly how the group has operated for years. So what about the new group? Well, this is talking about the new prayer breakfast. And as I said, I'm not going to get into this. I think the National Prayer Breakfast is bullshit. It shouldn't be a thing. Like, if you want to have a breakfast where you say a prayer, go to a fucking cafe. So now we go to the Fellowship, which is a Christian organization that was founded in 1935. I wonder what we can learn about it from... Let's take a look at who started this whole thing, first off, and then we will delve a little deeper real quick. Abraham, personal life. He went to a tent meeting. There's a Christian tent revival. It's a traveling pastor thing. In 1905, so he would have been, 19 at the time. And he found and met his future wife, daughter of a Danish pastor. Go figure. Let's see. This is a surprisingly sparse article. Spokane, received a ticket to work from a neighbor who was unable to use it. He traveled to Montana, found menial work, became an itinerant preacher at the age of 20, covering an area of 70 miles. Later, he studied at a seminary in Evanston, Indiana, and married Maddie Hansen in 1910, which was that Danish pastor daughter. He was assigned to Spokane by the Methodist Church, later assigned to Portland, Seattle, one daughter. So basically he was a minister, right, who was put around a bunch of places, and then founded the prayer breakfast after 4 years after talking to FDR here, apparently. Okay, so seems to be a Christian preacher with a bit of a political bent. So let's go ahead and get into the Christian organization with a political bent. The Fellowship, also known as the Family, blah, 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 blah. Influence. Prominent evangelical Christians have described the Fellowship as one of the most, or the most, politically well-connected ministries in the world. Dr. Michael Lindsay, an American sociologist, and former Rice University sociologist who studies the evangelical movement, said, quote, "There is no other organization like the Fellowship, especially among religious groups, in terms of its access or clout among the country's leadership." He also reported that lawmakers mentioned the Fellowship more than any other organization when asked to name a ministry with the most influence on their faith. Lindsay interviewed 360 evangelical elites, among whom, quote, 1 in 3 mentioned Doug Coe or the Fellowship as an important influence, end quote. Lindsay reported it had, quote, relationships with pretty much every world leader, good and bad, and there are not many organizations in the world that can claim that. In 1977, 4 years after he had converted to Christianity, Fellowship member and Watergate conspirator Charles Colson described the group as a veritable underground of Christ's men all through the U.S. government. So, when I say that Christians have been literally infiltrating our government to destabilize it for decades, I'm not being hyperbolic. It's literally happening. Documentation. Sorry. Former Kansas Governor Sam Brownback, also a former member of the Senate Prayer Group, has described fellowship members' method of operation. Quote, typically one person grows desirous of pursuing an action, a piece of legislation, diplomatic strategy, and others pull behind. Brownback has often joined with fellow family members in pursuing legislation. For example, in '99, he joined together with fellow family members Senator Strom Thurmond and Don Nichols to demand criminal investigation of Americans United for the Separation of Church and State. For Americans United for the Separation of Church and State. Which is something that was entrenched in the founding of America. They demanded criminal investigation into a 501c3 organization that want the church to not run our government. Fuck! And in 2005, Brownback joined with fellowship member Senator Tom Coburn to promote the Houses of Worship Act to allow tax-exempt religious institutions to endorse political candidates, which eventually became... Oh, God, what was that? It was the Johnson Amendment, right? I can't do this because the fucking Washington Post is paywalled. Okay, it was just... who knows? It may or may not be there. Just assume it's gone. Assume the Johnson Amendment is gone because nobody enforces it anyway. Churches can actively promote political candidates to their congregations as they see fit. They can give money, they can take money, they can do whatever they want without reprisal because the government refuses to act in proper fashion. So what does the family, the fellowship, the international organization actually want to do? Well, they want to induce a Christian theocracy, obviously. Why else would a Christian organization be in the brain work? Why else would a Christian organization be in politics if not to advance political strategies and advance political goals? Right? That's just by definition, categorical definition, what they have to be doing. To develop and maintain an informal association of people banded together to go out as ambassadors of reconciliation, modeling the principles of Jesus based on loving God and loving others. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I'm sure that's exactly what they want to do. Secrecy. In a report on the fellowship, the Los Angeles Times found fellowship members share a vow of silence about fellowship activities. Oddly, it is categorized under U.S. law as a church rather than as a political lobbying organization, so financial sources, budget expenditures, remain unknown. Coe and others cite biblical admonitions against public displays of good works, insisting that they would not be able to tackle their diplomatically sensitive missions if they drew public attention. Members, including congressmen, invoke this secrecy rule when refusing to discuss just about every aspect of the fellowship and their involvement in it. God, it's like the fucking Illuminati, only real. So, anyways, the fellowship, as we are starting to build a bit of a, you know, what's the word I'm looking for here? Scaffolding, seems to be a incredibly secretive, hyper-Christian, theocratic organization that seeks to undermine the United States' democracies and instead push for a unified system of morals under the principles of their church. And in case you haven't quite caught this yet, that's a bad thing, because not everybody's in that church. What does this mean for a Catholic, right? A Catholic's probably not going to agree with everything they do. Neither would like a Methodist or an Amish lad, right? An Amish lass, they probably won't fucking appreciate these people like doing certain things. Muslim sure as shit wouldn't. A Jewish person wouldn't. A Hindu wouldn't, right? Anyways, so here we can see activities that the fellowship, the family, or the international organization have been pushing. The National Prayer Breakfast, which we already knew about. Prayer Breakfast Movement, which is a bunch of smaller versions that have infected every level of society in our government, including Congress, the executive branch, the military, business people, the Pentagon. Ugh. They do it in Russia through some of their shit, right? They've done private democracy, or diplomacy, not democracy. I'm apparently having a hard time reading now. Relationships with other organizations. Let's see here. We've got the Wilberforce Foundation, Traditional Values Coalition, which fight against Marxist, leftist, homosexual Islamic coalition. Oh, that's a hell of a thing. I'm not sure I know very many people who are Marxist, leftist, homosexual Islamics. Some of those things don't go together very well, do they? I don't know. Just, for fuck's sake, I swear. Three Swallows Foundation, International Center for Religion and Diplomacy, Young Life International. You get the picture of what's being painted here, right? Let's see. Handling of politicians' extramarital affairs. This should be fun. Let's choose the Pickering case because it's small. Chip Pickering was a United States representative from Mississippi from 1997 to 2008, and in 2009, his wife filed suit against his former college sweetheart and alleged mistress. Mrs. Pickering alleged that her husband restarted his relationship with her while he was a United States congressperson, prior to and while living in the well-known C Street complex in DC. Remember, the C Street complex? The C Street complex is it's this little brick building, right? It's this brick building that apparently senators live in as well while living in that C Street. So not only does this C Street Center house their behind the scenes canoodling, it also seems to be a place where the senators live, or maybe just their mistresses. I don't know. The fellowship runs a $1.8 million 3-story brick mansion known as C Street. Let's look at this. Let's look at this together, shall we? This is in Washington, D.C., not Washington State. Sorry, folks who live in the tiny little house. Okay. Here is your C Street. You've got, what is it? 1, 2, 3 stories, maybe 4 or 5, depending on basement. I mean, who knows how deep this complex goes. It's clearly stretching underneath the entire city of Washington, D.C. They're coming for us. No, don't take my Alex Jones impersonation seriously. But this is the seat of power of a theocracy, or an attempted theocracy. So that's fun. It is the former covenant for the nearby St. Peter's Church and is located a short distance from the U.S. Capitol. The structure has 12 bedrooms, 9 bathrooms, 5 living rooms, and 4 dining rooms, 3 offices, a kitchen, and a small chapel. The facility houses mostly Republican members of Congress. Yep. They just live in a theocratic household. That's cool. It's like the exact opposite of good. Okay, now this is about the fellowship, right? Their property holdings. In 1978, they purchased a big-ass mansion. It's on 70 acres. It is used for Bible study, counseling, hymn sings, life mentoring, prayer groups, prayer breakfasts, luncheons, dinners, and hospitality receptions for international reconciliation and conflict resolution initiatives. The home was once surrounded by cedar trees and so was renamed Cedars. Let's see. In March 1990, Wham, which previously owned C Street, purchased a nearby property for $500,000. Sold it to his father. Okay, second property for $1 million. So it looks like they're just basically racking up important buildings that they can use for staging grounds. Right? It's very, very commonplace for large, wealthy organizations to do. Right? They slurp things up and make sure that they have their fingers in the pies that they need to have. And you got to have places to put your pies. And so they buy places to put their pies, so they put their fingers in their pies. Following? Good. According to White House records from 78, Jimmy Carter traveled to the Cedar Point farm. Oh, no, Carter. No. You build so many houses. Other fellowship properties, they've got a Southeast White House, which is located on Pennsylvania Avenue, 19th Street House, brick apartment building, Maryland. Okay, yeah. Excuse me. The Fellowship Foundation, which since 1935 has conducted no public fundraising programs since 1935, relies entirely on private donations. In 2007, they received nearly $17 million to support their 400 ministries. Among the fellowship's key supporters include billionaire Paul Temple. What does he do? He made the noetic science. It's so noetic science is parapsychological research institute whack job nonsense, right? This is like people that study psychic projection and think that like meditation and yoga can make you fall through the floor and shit like that, or whatever. Crazy woo-woo nonsense stuff, right? Created the Temple Awards for creative altruism, because we know how well that works out. Yeah. Okay. Three Swallows. We've heard that before. Where was Three Swallows before? Here it is. Three Swallows was relationships with other organizations. We need to look into Three Swallows. Put a pen in that. Put a pen in your swallowing. 1.7 million to the International Foundation, including a bunch of money, more money. That up. Searching. Hope it's not porn. No? Oh, good. It's not porn. We'll check out the charity thing here. Another supporter. So they get a bunch of money, right, from a bunch of different places. What the fuck? The Kingdom Fund, Kingdom Oil Christian Foundation, Twin Cities Christian Foundation. What? Kingdom Oil. Good Christ, they have everything. They're everywhere. Guys, I don't know if you knew this. Listen, look at me. Look at me. The Christians are everywhere. Okay, so we have a good idea of like what the fellowship, the family, the international organization is. They are a bunch of people insinuating themselves into our society and attempting, to create a theocracy. As I've said time and time again for the last half hour or whatever it's been. Now, how does this play in to what I want to talk about today with the National Prayer Breakfast and the Alliance Defending Freedom, which is a Christian hate group, or I'm going to call it a Christian hate group. We'll get there. So, have you guys seen these? I don't know if I'm going to get fucking flagged for this or not, so we'll just kind of take it slowly. These Super Bowl commercials. I know I'm a bit late to this, but deal with me. Let's go through this. These are things that are these Super Bowl ads for the He Gets Us commercials, right? Were put out by the Alliance Defending Freedom and had ties to the fellowship, the family, etc. Right? So let's go through this thing.
There was a family.
There was a family.
That played together and laughed together.
Okay.
But as they grew older, opinions widened. Conversations became heated. And reunions became uncomfortable.
Oh no.
Eventually, gatherings stopped because each had to be right.
We don't want that. We don't want that. We don't want that. Oh no.
So that seems pretty innocuous, right? Like, that seems fairly innocuous on its face, right? Let's get into it. So this is from LGBTQ Nation. Loving Christian Super Bowl ads connected to anti-LGBTQ plus hate group. That's right. Who would have guessed? They're laundering fascism through Jesus. Wow. What's that old fucking saying? When fascism comes to America, it'll be wrapped in the flag and carrying the cross. Yeah, something like that. So Christian campaign planning to air 2 Super Bowl ads, blah, 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 blah. The He Gets Us campaign, which is quote unquote not affiliated with a specific church or denomination. They're trying to connect to like Jesus being kind of like an influencer of his time. But the He Gets Us is a subsidiary of the Servant Foundation, which has donated $50 million to the Alliance Defending Freedom. So the He Gets Us campaign, right, that could afford to buy multiple 30-second Super Bowl ads. Oh, hold on. A 3-year, $1 billion campaign. And so, like, when we're talking earlier, when we were talking to Miles about, like, the GDP of America, $1 billion, like 130 billion is small potatoes, right? And it is to the United States government. This is not the United States government. These are private organizations, and $1 billion is a lot of fucking money, okay? It's incomprehensible, almost. It's like, I want you to imagine all the rice you've ever seen in your life. Now, take that rice, add about 20,000 more piles of the same amount of rice, and then triple that, and you might be getting close to the amount of rice that would be 1 billion grains of rice, right? It's obscene how big this number is. Okay. So the Alliance Defending Freedom. if you have been a victim of online harassment for being queer, if you have listened to somebody talk to someone and they were being anti-queer, what's that guy's name? Knowles from the Daily Wire recently, he came out and said that like transgenderism needs to get like zapped off the face of the planet. Basically, he's just calling for open genocide. There's a good chance that that was being funded by the Alliance Defending Freedom in some way, shape, and or form. Because it is one of the most well-organized and influential Christian interest groups in the United States. They own Amy Coney Barrett. She's in the group. Mike Pence, William Barr, Jeff Sessions. Are these names that ring a bell to you? Because they fucking well should. These people have been guided and funded by this group, which has been working to outlaw abortion and remove queer people from existence. We can go through if you want. I don't really want to go through all of their leadership and stuff. We did that with the Fellowship Foundation. It gave us a little bit of a background into kind of how they work. This is a much younger organization that's much more radical. Look, here is their opposition to LGBTQ rights, to queer people. I'm just going to highlight this, and we're going to keep going, and we're going to go right there. That, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 paragraphs is just probably the tip of the iceberg to a very deep dive that we could do on the Alliance Defending Freedom. But what you need to understand about this organization is that they are operating on local, state, federal, and international levels in courts, in Congress, in school commission boards to remove your rights and kill you. Hell, probably me too, because I'm fucking queer as shit. They don't like abortion. They don't like birth control. They don't like euthanasia. They reject Jews. They're anti-vaccination and lockdown. Like, I mean, honestly, it is just like a group of the single most evil people that currently exist in American society. And, man, like, as far as things we could actually do stuff about, this is actually one of those things that, like, pushing them out into the openly talking about the Alliance Defending Freedom, the Three Swallows Foundation, the fucking, God, what was it called? Whatever this fucking guy was doing, the He Gets Us, guys, the Fellowship, the National Prayer Breakfast, like, all of these things are interconnected, which is why I started with the National Prayer Breakfast, because you start down this rabbit hole with something that is visible and open to public scrutiny at a national level because it's talked about and the president goes there and it's very like religiosity centric. And then you start going down the rabbit hole into who funds this and who controls it, where are they connected to, what do they stand for, and then you get to this: the guys that are on their side of the vanguard, outwriting and trying to push the boundaries, trying to take and nitpick all of their little things for them. And I feel very, very strongly that we need more light on these topics. We need to be able to take a look. Ew, got a hair in my mouth. To take a look at what is going on and be able to identify these things when we see them working in real life. I mean, for fuck's sake, the ADF has Amy Coney Barrett, who is probably the least, like, I'm probably more qualified to sit on the Supreme Court than she is, because at least I would listen to fucking Cersei Aurora, or not, Stare Decisis. I would at least go and look at the history of law, right? Just, it's utterly kind of almost traumatizing in a way, right? Like, to think about just how deeply entrenched they are in our government, and how hard it is to uproot these very powerful forces. And I think that it's something that left-leaning folks have been very bad at over the course of our time here in America. The Democrats certainly aren't going to get them out. They're part of it. I mean, to an extent, not all Democrats, of course, but like a pretty hefty amount are all pretty pro-Christian. It's rough. I'm going to echo a sentiment I heard on another live streamer's platform. If you're not already left-leaning and part of the DSA, the Democratic Socialists for America, I know that they're not great. I know that they have their own problems as an organization, but like, they're small enough that they can be actively changed by new influx of people. And I think that you should sign up. If you're not already a member, sign up to be a member. I am. If you can, go down to their meetings, raise new topics, push the conversation in the way you want. Get involved in local elections, get involved in the way that your town and city are ran. Help out at schools, do whatever you can, basically, I'm saying, to try and begin a movement from the bottom of society, the most basic levels, the structural foundations of America. And as leftists, we need to infect just as heavily our society as these people have. We can't hope to push against this brick wall of America. We need to be within sight of the wall. You have to be the vines that put your roots through the bricks to push them out, right? Before we can put in new bricks, we gotta get those old corrupt bricks out and gotta put in those new shiny socialist bricks, right? So yeah, I will end this as I tend to always do when talking about heavy shit like this. Push. Get yourself up and open. Get yourself as equipped as you can. Go to protests, support local elections, put people in office that you believe in. If you don't have anyone in your area that looks good, maybe it's time to run in for office, y'all. Like, I don't think I would do good in local office, or else I would be running for it. Just personal issues aside, don't think I would be good as a politician. At least not in the current system. So I'm not. But that may change. Who knows? Maybe you'll see Jake the Fake Jake on a billboard near you. Probably not. I'm in Seattle. There's a lot of good folk out here already. And if you know anyone who is queer or you're queer yourself, do you have yourself, make sure you're in a safe community. Make sure you know people that will support you in the hard times that are going to come. Make sure that you are able to defend yourself as necessary, whatever that looks like for you. I'm not going to tell you how to defend yourself. You're all adults and intelligent. I'm sure that you can reasonably figure out how to do that yourself. If you can't, well, talk to some folks around you that you know and you feel safe with. Talk to them about how you would be defended in situations that could occur. It's important to put yourself in those positions, I think. So yeah. With all that being said, kind of a down note to end on, but I think we had a good conversation today. Had a good brief discussion as to the National Prayer Breakfast and the infection of Christian theocracy in our government and the slow erosion of our democracy and freedoms. And I hope that you all will have a nice day. I hope that you can have a good end of the weekend. And if you are going to work on Monday, my sympathies for you. I will be starting to stream weekly, or as best to weekly as I can, starting Wednesday, if my calendar and brain are in sync. So look forward to seeing me a little bit more frequently. I hope that everyone has a wonderful afternoon. Take care, and I don't